Their marriage, which had once seemed solid as granite, carved out of eternal love, had in the last few years resembled only a fragile shell, empty inside, a dying fire, where rare, random flashes of warmth, more random than sincere, reminded of the former passion, but mostly, only cold, gray ash and all-consuming indifference. Pavel, a man with a soft, pliable, like plasticine, character, who always preferred to avoid sharp corners, loud scandals and open conflicts, saw in his wife, Anna, the center of his world, his only reference point, his greatest treasure, which he carefully guarded, but which seemed to elude him with each passing day. He was not the one who held the reins of power, not the leader who led the way, but rather a reliable but somewhat weak-willed companion who quietly floated with the flow of her life, trying to stay afloat, not to cause a storm, not to disturb the fragile semblance of peace. Anna, on the contrary, was always distinguished by a lively, indomitable character, remarkable ambitions that seemed to find no outlet in their modest life, and an insatiable thirst for something more than a simple, predictable existence. Over time, when the routine of marriage, this monotonous, predictable, like a broken record, series of days, began to press on her more and more, like a heavy slab, and Pavel seemed to be immersed deeper and deeper in his quiet, unnoticeable life, in his books, in his thoughts, in his world, which was closed off from her. She began to feel trapped, locked in a golden cage, from which there was not a single chance to escape. Boredom became her constant, unchanging companion, corroding her from the inside, like acid, slowly but surely thinning metal, making it brittle and useless. She craved bright colors, thrills, stormy emotions, the very attention that Pavel, due to his natural modesty, non-confrontational nature and, perhaps, fear of losing her, could not or, perhaps, simply did not want to give her. His silence, his compliance, which had once seemed to her like reliability and predictability, now felt like complete, absolute indifference, like a sign that he was no longer interested in her. Their home, once filled with laughter, music and warmth, was increasingly less filled with echoes of their shared, happy life. After his work, Pavel, tired of the world, of his inner experiences, often withdrew into himself, immersing himself in books, in household chores, in his thoughts, which were much more understandable and pleasant to him than the complex, tangled relationship with his wife. Anna, feeling increasingly lonely, unclaimed, forgotten, sought solace outside the family hearth, where she was seen, appreciated, where her existence mattered. Her need for recognition, passion, a sense of her own importance, for that spark that ignited her from within, found no response in their routine, predictable life, which had become a real torture for her. The betrayal began unnoticed, like a quiet whisper, like a light breeze that gradually turns into a storm, sweeping away everything in its path. It did not happen at work, where everything was in plain sight, where everything was under control, but in another, more personal, more intimate space. She met Andrei, an old friend of Pavel's, the same one whom Pavel once considered his best friend, his brother in spirit, but with whom their paths gradually diverged due to their radically different characters. Andrei, unlike Pavel, was his complete opposite, more assertive, more passionate, more self-confident. He knew how to captivate a woman, how to awaken long-forgotten feelings in her, how to make her feel desired, special, the only one. Their meeting happened by chance, on one of the rare evenings when Pavel was completely absorbed in his affairs, his work, his inner life, and Anna, feeling completely abandoned, decided to go out to unwind, to find at least some variety. Andrei, seeing her, felt like he had found a long-lost, precious stone, remembered the past, remembered her bright, lively nature, and without thinking twice, began to court her. Anna, hungry for attention, for passion, for that feeling of life that Pavel could not give her, succumbed to his pressure, his words, his looks. Their relationship lasted for several months, carefully hidden from view, filled with secret meetings, stolen nights, and the painful realization that she was betraying not only her husband, but also herself, her own world, once dear to her. For her, this was not so much a betrayal as a way to combat boredom, a sense of her own worthlessness, a desire to prove to herself that she was still alive, still worth something. Pavel, in his quiet, vulnerable, like finely tanned leather, nature, felt that something was wrong. He felt this change in Anna, this cold detachment, this refusal of closeness, which was like a blow to the gut, like a knife in the back. He saw how she was moving away, how her eyes stopped shining when she met him, how her laughter began to sound false, unnatural, like a recording that was being played over and over again. He tried to talk to her, tried to reach her, to her heart, to her soul, but her answers were evasive, her excuses were unconvincing, and her gaze increasingly looked somewhere into the distance, as if she was looking for something there that she could not find next to him, something that Pavel simply could not give her. He felt helpless, as if he was losing not only his wife, but also himself, his own identity, his significance. He was too weak to fight for her, too intimidated to demand the truth, too accustomed to his role as the quiet husband, the invisible man, to risk destroying the fragile semblance of peace that they had worked so long and so hard to create, even though he knew that this world had long since rotted from within. The truth came to him not from his own observations, not from his attempts to find out the truth, not from any logical conclusions he might have drawn. It came from outside, from those he had thought of as mere acquaintances, friends, people who knew and loved them both. Mutual acquaintances who knew Pavel, Anna, and Andrei began telling him that Anna was spending an unusually large amount of time with Andrei, his former best friend, the one he had trusted as himself. They hinted at their closeness, at their secret meetings, at a relationship that had gone far beyond mere companionship. They told him of seeing them holding hands, of seeing them laughing together, away from home, in places she and Pavel had never been, places Anna had always called too commonplace for their special relationship. These words, spoken in a quiet whisper, in a half-voice, so as not to attract unnecessary attention, so as not to cause a scandal, sounded to Pavel like a sentence, like a hammer smashing his fragile world into a million indifferent fragments. Every story, every detail that he heard seemed to him like another nail being driven into the coffin of his marriage, his self-esteem, his male pride, his faith in people. Sadness mixed with bitterness, and bitterness with a quiet, growing, all-consuming anger that seemed to be slowly but surely consuming him from within. He felt humiliated, disgraced, crushed. His weakness, his inability to keep his wife, his silent consent to this situation, his fear of her disappointment, of her condemnation, all this caused in him not his usual passivity, not a desire to hide, but a deep, cold, calculating desire not just to take revenge, but to make her feel the same pain, the same humiliation, the same hopelessness that he himself felt. He wanted the world to see what she had done, for her to realize the full depth of her act, the baseness of her betrayal, for her to feel as lost and useless as he felt himself. Pavel's goal was not financial ruin, not the destruction of her career through direct accusations, not physical violence, which would be too simple and unaesthetic. His revenge had to be public, psychological, aimed at breaking her reputation, her self-esteem, so that she would feel as insignificant, forgotten and disgraced as he felt himself. He decided to use her desire for attention, her thirst for bright emotions and her boredom against her. He knew that Anna, accustomed to attention and admiration, would seek it out, and that the most painful thing for her would be to find herself in the center of negative attention, to become the object of universal condemnation, when all her masks would fall off, and only the naked, ugly truth would remain. Soon after he learned the truth, when everything became crystal clear to him, Pavel began to act. He knew that Anna was very proud of her image as the perfect wife, her role in their social life, her image of a well-groomed, happy, successful woman. He knew that for her, her reputation, the respect of their mutual friends, their social circle, that was everything. He decided to use this to strike at the most painful place. He decided to use the holiday that was supposed to be a symbol of their love and unity, against them. At the evening dedicated to their wedding anniversary, which they decided to celebrate in the circle of close friends and acquaintances, to demonstrate to everyone that their marriage was still strong, still alive, Pavel prepared his surprise. It was not a loud scandal, shouting or revelations that could cause Igor's immediate condemnation, but leave Anna in relative safety, in the role of a victim of circumstances. It was something much more sophisticated, more vile, more precise, calculated for psychological effect. When Anna, beautifully dressed, shining like a star, and, as always, striving to be in the center of attention, was communicating with the guests, smiling, laughing, demonstrating her involvement in their social life, her happy role as a wife, Pavel approached the microphone, which was set up for toasts, for congratulations, for uttering words of love and recognition. Silence fell over the hall, all eyes, as if on command, were directed at him, at the quiet, usually inconspicuous husband. He looked pale, like a ghost, but in his eyes, usually meek and avoiding direct gaze, now burned a strange, cold fire, which did not bode well, which promised something sinister. "I want to say a few words," he began, and his voice, usually quiet and expressionless, now sounded even, calm, but there was an unusual steely hardness in it that no one had noticed before. "I want to thank everyone who has been so caring towards my wife, Anna, lately. Your support, your attention, it is so important for her when she feels forgotten. I especially want to thank Andre. Andre, you are our old friend, aren't you? The one with whom we grew up together, with whom we shared everything. Even when it came to what is dear to us. Anna, you love surprises so much, don't you? You missed the past so much. Those times when you felt truly desired, truly alive, when someone saw you not just as a wife, but as a woman. And Andre, it seems, helped you remember that." Anna, hearing these words, froze in place, her smile frozen on her face, like a mask that was about to crack. Her face began to lose color, as if all the blood, all the life had been washed off it. She felt where Pavel was heading, and her heart began to beat at a furious speed, beating out anxious, panicky rhythms, foreshadowing a catastrophe. She saw in his gaze an uncharacteristic determination, which she had been waiting for so long, but not in this form, not directed against her, but rather aimed at her complete destruction. Andre, hearing these words, first looked at Pavel in bewilderment, trying to understand what the catch was, Then his gaze became more intense when he began to realize what was happening, and felt how something was wrong. Something terrible was beginning to seep into their ideal world, which they had so carefully created. I know that you spent a lot of time together, Pavel continued, and there was a note of bitter, almost unbearable irony in his voice that cut the ear, penetrating into the very depths of the soul, and I appreciate that you did it so openly, so boldly, so honestly. After all, honesty is important, isn't it? Especially in our time, when everyone values transparency so much, when everyone loves to discuss other people's lives so much, when everyone loves to judge so much. I heard how you discussed your meetings, how you helped each other. I especially remember your conversation about how you met in that little coffee shop where you and I, Anna, had never been, where you said that it was too quiet, too banal for us. How you spent time there when I was busy, when I was trying to earn money for our future, for your dream of a new car, for your dream of a new life that you talked about so often. How you talked about how bored you both were, how you both didn't enough something that could light a spark in your eyes. And how did you decide that it was enough to suffer, enough to wait, enough to be invisible? Andre, you felt lonely too, didn't you? I know. You were always like me, only more noisy. So I'm glad you found each other. You deserved it. You deserved this passion, this brightness, this life that you craved so much. And I'm glad you could share it together. Because the main thing is happiness, right? Even if it's built on fragments of someone else's happiness, on other people's pain, on shattered dreams. He spoke calmly, without strain, without shouting, without tears, but each of his words was like a thin, sharp blade that he plunged straight into Anna's heart, into her reputation, into her self-esteem, in front of all those people whose opinion meant so much to her, whose admiration she craved so much. A dead, deafening silence fell over the room. All eyes, as if on command, turned to Anna, to her frightened face, distorted with horror, to her frozen smile, which now seemed like a grimace. She saw how her carefully constructed illusion, her carefully created image of the ideal wife, the happy woman, was collapsing before the eyes of her friends, her acquaintances, the people she had known for years, whom she wanted to impress. She felt how the gazes of those around her were boring into her, how they condemned her, how they despised her, how they whispered behind her back, predicting her future fate. Her humiliation was public, painful. It was exactly as Pavel wanted it to be, deep, all-encompassing, making her feel insignificant, forgotten, disgraced. Pavel, seeing her reaction, felt neither triumph nor joy, but rather devastation mixed with some strange, cold satisfaction. He had done what he considered necessary, what he thought would give him back some semblance of control over his own life, over his destiny. He had made her suffer. He had made her feel the pain, the helplessness, the emptiness that he himself had felt when he realized that his world had collapsed. But it had not brought him relief. It had only left behind an even greater emptiness, an even greater pain, an even greater disappointment. He was no longer the weak husband who had silently endured, who could not resist. He had become the husband who had taken revenge. But the price of that revenge had been too high. He had lost Anna completely, and perhaps had lost a part of himself, leaving behind only a cold emptiness and a bitter echo of justice that had not been as sweet as he had imagined. His revenge, like a poisonous flower, blossomed on the ruins of his own life, leaving behind only the poisonous scent of destruction.